Hello, I'm your host, Kayla, and this is Spectra Storytime. Within the world of Spectra lies a land of lost souls seeking solace in whichever places they can find it. Today's story is called The Mannequin Wife. Like all the tall tales on this channel, this story is from my unpublished short story collection, Spectra. I hope you enjoy. Now, shall we begin? The Mannequin Wife. The husband. The room should have smelled of mothballs or stale morning breath, chalky on the walls where it'd crumble in the dusty corners like ash. Instead, the air was starched and clean. Faint traces of lavender from the neat garden below the window circulated throughout the green-washed room. And there, in the center of it all, with her flushed cheeks and wide eyes trembling ever so slightly, was his wife. Radiant in the afternoon summer haze, so vibrantly alive, more than he'd seen her in years. She looked so alone, but not lonely, gazing out at the room, as if a vast sea crashed far beyond his feeble vision. She was still as a mannequin, but absent of the waxy plastic sheen of the still life she embodied. Mocked? Her eyes flashed beneath those pale blonde lashes, her blinks the only source of movement besides the slow, rhythmic rise of her chest, the only evidence of the soul thrashing inside. How long she'd stood there, he didn't know. Minutes, hours, yet the air was not still, how it vibrated all around her, as if her body were sending out currents of electricity with each strange clench of her body to stay still. It was that which disturbed him most, not her uncanny expression, almost mournful in its neutrality, an action in itself her stillness, as if repeatedly striking him with the obtrusive space it took up in the room, commanding his attention. Something twisted in his gut at the wrongness of it, and yet the room was not affected, not dulled, quite the opposite. The wood cabinets were lacquered and gleaming, free of dust, the lilies preened in their crystal vase, scattering beams of ruby, amethyst, citrine, and emerald onto the blank walls. It was as if the room had been ringing with laughter just before he'd entered. He'd been made an invader in his own home, and there his wife sat, basking in it all. As if by accident, his presence had been made a wilderness by her indifference. She still had not acknowledged him. His outsiderness was a mere coincidence. How many times had he stumbled upon her like this in the past few months, staring blankly in an empty room over a glass held up to no one, arranged crudely over a wooden chair, playing the part of the thinker, her elbow resting on her knee, pressing a bruise there, a fist to her clammy forehead. Posing for the lamps and curtains and painted ladies she emulated, pretending she was someplace else. Even now, it was like she was not there at all, evaporating with each slow inhale through her still, rouged lips. The neighbor. He asked me over for coffee because he said he was concerned about his wife, though those aren't the words I would use. It was disturbing, plain and simple. She was clearly having some kind of breakdown, but he was determined to find a solution. Like what she was doing was something we housewives had all experienced behind closed doors. Some kind of deranged rite of passage we kept quiet amongst ourselves, like our time of the month. Poor dear. I knew what was going on before he approached me. In fact, I suspect that's why he came to me in the first place. Also, I'm somewhat of a mother figure around here. All these young couples move into the neighborhood to play house. It's intimidating for them, I can imagine. Quite an adjustment, especially those coming from the big hustle and bustle of the city, where everyone's too busy to sit down and talk over a nice roast dinner. And me, well, I'm always happy to lend some reassurance. I've been on this block since I was a little girl. This very house. That's long enough to know a thing or two about the domestic. And it's not a cakewalk either, mind you. Not on your own. But back to the wife, yes, I could see her through the curtains when I passed the house. Now, I'm not some peeping Tom. I've got a dog, you see, a little Mexican Chihuahua, like those celebrities push in baby carriages and tote around in their purses. Mine is too excitable for all that, and Bill says I'm too soft on her anyway. She requires a lot of walking, and that's what I do. I walk till my legs get all tingly and jellied at the time of day when the sun is a bright jewel in the sky, threatening to burst, and I have to squint so hard, black spots blot my vision like a broken film. And in those moments, it's just me and my dog, Pansy, and those little legs snipping back and forth over the sidewalk. We cross into other neighborhoods where no one will feel obliged to stop for a chat because we are well and truly strangers. It's that feeling of being anonymous, walking past those houses with their unfamiliar cars and bikes with bells for children I've never met. It's like I belong somewhere else, a different country, maybe, like I'm just passing through. And I think to myself, maybe it's high time Bill and I find a place we can rest for a while, somewhere with a mountain view and brisk air in the morning that turns your breath to fog, and the steam out your tea is something to marvel at. Bill and I could wander around the little light-up village at night with open-toed shoes and catch a late dinner somewhere because that's the custom in this country. And we'd meet another couple from a few states over who also needed to rest for a while. We'd trade stories I could bring back to the girls at my sewing circle. They'd know I had more to talk about besides the luncheon we're hosting and the town gossip that would follow, because there was still a flushed, fresh-faced, wild girl in here they hadn't even met yet, who read detective novels in the bath and even did the voices of the characters sometimes, just as good as the bottle blondes on TV. Sometimes I think to myself, though I'd never tell Bill this, because it's really nothing, just a half-thought before breakfast. But I think to myself, sometimes, that when it's my time to go, it'll be just like my walks. Just me and Pansy shuffling along on the sidewalk, counting the newspapers left on the lawns, humming quietly to myself the songs I sang as a girl. And on these walks, I could see her, veiled ever so slightly behind her white lace curtains, still as a ghost, like she'd been shocked or petrified. Every day she'd take on a new position. Nothing could disturb her either. I'd ring the doorbell and not a creature would stir, not even the maid, as if she'd been ordered to keep away. Keep away. I was just itching to get a real good look at her. We all were, us wives on the block, the husbands too. After that baby, Rory, was it? We hardly saw her outside of the morning walk to the bus stop. We'd ask the kids what they thought of him, if his mother was under the weather or would like us to drop off a casserole or two, but he seemed none the wiser. So of course, when her husband asked me to visit, I put on my white gloves and best church hat as quick as I could manage. As I made my way with Pansy in tow, she's just so good with people, all the kids running up to kiss and cuddle her, I wondered if he'd wait until after the next school year ended to file for divorce, or at least wait until Christmas. The soonest they let you out of the hospital for these kind of things is about 3 months, so he'll surely have to wait until then. Thank God for that little angel being at summer camp, although, thinking back, that probably made it worse. An empty nest, now that I knew well. When her husband opened the door, his eyes were red like he'd gone swimming for too long and had forgotten to close his eyes underwater. The rest of him was as put together as ever, blue suit, no creases nor a hint of 5 o'clock shadow in sight. It wasn't until he sat me down in the kitchen with the door closed that I got a sense of him coming undone. I found myself offering him a drink like I'd invited him over. To his credit, his hands didn't shake when he took the cup, but he didn't touch it either. I suspect he'd had enough that evening. "Would you like to see her?" he asked me after my cup had gone cold. And it was all I could do not to jump up and swing the door open myself. Still, I let him lead me there, into the bedroom of all places, my hand a steady rail for him to grip onto. "Nora, you have a visitor," he called softly through the door so as not to startle her, which I would find strange later. Then, with a knock, he revealed her. I'd thought that when I saw her, I'd want to take her up in my fat granny arms and squeeze the sickness out of her. I thought she'd collapse like a bag of twigs, all dizzy and frail, and I'd be sticky with snot and sweat by the time Pansy and I got home for supper. And yet, as I entered, it was I who felt fragile. To look at her was to become extinguished. She'd sucked up all the air in the room, drawn it within herself, and used it to bury her soul deep inside. Tucked away so tightly, no one could dare reach her until she let them, as though her body were shouting a demand, knowing full well she would not be heard. She was sitting still, just as he'd said she would be, just like I'd glimpsed through the window a few evenings prior. And there remained that perfect control of her body. Up close, it was ever more striking. Her unnatural stillness emanated a sheer force of will I'd never witnessed in a woman, and I found myself wanting to cower back from it for fear of falling under the influence of her gravity. There was something strangely provocative about the way her dress was pulled up to expose the knee. Maybe because I knew it was intentional. I couldn't find it within me to play shy and look away. It felt disrespectful to ignore her careful arrangement. Why had she wanted us to see her in this way? It was all very intimate, the way she'd pulled her legs up tight against her chest, a sort of self-soothing gesture. It was a vulnerability she'd chosen to put on full display, even as she herself, her real self, floated far away. I tried to picture what she dreamt of, what dreamscape she'd escaped to that she was allowing us to glimpse through that faraway look in the direction of the wall. I couldn't bear to break her silence. It was like coming into your child's bedroom after they'd been stricken with fever to find them finally cooled and sleeping. Anything other than leaving would have felt sinful, and so I did. Even as her husband begged me not to, even as I imagined how he'd shake her like a rag doll after I left, shout at her, slap her, douse her with cold water in his attempts to wake her up, as if her eyes were not already open, as if all this had been merely an accident. The curiosity didn't leave me, even days after the incident. It wasn't until I dared walk past the house again, no Pansy this time, to see her standing once again by the window, that I admitted to myself, I wanted to try it. I wanted to become a mannequin wife. The maid. Those of us who have to sweat for a living, wiping up their dirt or the snot off their children's noses, toiling all day just to toil some more when we got home, too busy to think, let alone go crazy from being bored. We didn't have to make up problems just to have something to complain about at Sunday brunch. Besides, I don't know if I could sit still for that long, even if I tried. I nearly passed out into the potato salad during revival week. Just ask Father Mathis. The last couple times I found her, I didn't even bother trying to fix her. You get used to ignoring things you're supposed to, even if it lights you up inside at the sheer nerve of it. How good some people have it and don't even know it. Sooner or later, it just becomes another drop in the rain, and don't you know the Lord is my shelter. But I suppose I knew who I was and what I had to accomplish. No moment had been wasted. The seconds I stopped for breath meant something. No, I suppose my money, which was really the children's lunch, dinner, and mended shoes, the husband's insulin, the church's pie, the neighbor's sugar, was still mine to give away. Never in this life would I feel useless or a burden. I am the Lord's to use, and use me he has, for I am blessed. And that, well, that's more than something, now isn't it? There would always be somebody with more of what I had and also less. And I should thank the good Lord for that which I can call my own. Because life is a gift, his gift. He has the freedom to bless you with or give away. But that woman, God help her, and take my judgment away. That woman had some nerve going away like that. What if the child had seen her? As if it wasn't bad enough, her whole neighborhood talking about it, peering in through the blinds, asking to borrow a broom just to get a good look at her. I can't bring myself to ask her about it. I suspect she's happier to be left alone. 'Cause that's why she's doing it, ain't she? She's running away, and I'm sorry to say it, but there's just no way I'm gonna be the one to chase after her. I do what I can. I bake her cakes and wash her sheets and brush her hair sometimes like she's those little porcelain dolls you pass in the store windows. And ain't that enough? Ain't I supposed to leave some things up to her husband so he feels useful? Ain't I allowed to sit down for a while in my corner of her kitchen and read the newspaper nice and slow? 'Cause I ain't in no rush to fix this mama, iron this mama. No, sir. I must admit, sometimes I struggle to resist. It's the way her eyes flutter when she's just snapping out of it. The glazed look washes away, and for a moment she looks so calm, like she's been sleeping long and hard, enough to leave pillow creases on her cheeks and drool in her hair, so long she's forgotten where she is until she don't, and the fear sets in. That's when I usually bring her some tea or some buttered toast with apricot jam I make at home with my sister-in-law when she comes to visit. But I've made a pact with myself not to say nothing to her, not to touch her when she's like that. It's her choice to make, even if it's a bad one. I got folks to worry about at home and can't be spending all my energy trying to wake somebody up who'd rather stay asleep. You learn that kind of thing when you get to my age. I've been taking care of people all my life, so long it became a habit, and I stopped being sure if it ever been a choice. But I suppose I do enjoy it now. I remember it was in nursing school, around the second year, that I finally started to feel a little lighter on my feet, a little softer under the covers, instead of all bunched up inside. Maybe it was 'cause it was such a small program, and we all had class together, studied together, ate lunch together, heck, even drank together, secretly with all the lights dimmed down. Then, of course, poor Jeremiah got into that business with those boys when he went down south, and all that went out the window. He's just fine now, still lives from time to time, but he can't get around on his own now. More than I can say for the missus. Not sure if she'll be a missus for much longer. Lord knows my Rufus wouldn't put up with mess like that. But maybe that's what she wants. Maybe that's been her plan all along. Like she'd just been itching under that designer house coat with the floral lace trim and silk buttons. And she just wants out. Out! That house, that marriage, even that sweet little boy always asking me to play with him 'cause he likes the funny faces I pull when I play army men with him. Or maybe she ain't got no reason 'cause she don't need one. Maybe white people are crazy. You tell me. The wife. As a teenager, I'd always taken a great thrill and satisfaction from train hopping. I felt like a gypsy or a pirate, knowing I'd escaped fading into the ranks of sheep people with their dull eyes and leather briefcases and coffee and cigarettes for breakfast. Nowadays, I take great pleasure in paying. I proudly greet the ticket men with a doughy, eager grin of "Good morning" and "Thank you for your service," because I'm happy to be a part of it now, an equal contributor in a system wholly greater than myself. Like a bee in a hive, dutifully gathering pollen and turning honey, my role, while small, is important. I'm keeping the train running with my tickets and my taxes, my easy compliance. With such a small action, the little tear of my ticket and a firm smile goodbye, all that I hold up with my small, eager hands is acknowledged. I haven't ridden the train in a long time. With Rory away at camp, there's been little need. I used to go into the city once a week to take him to the zoo, or see a play, or go shopping. He's so good when I take him, hardly whines or makes a sound amongst the sweeping crowds and honking cars. With those summer sky, curious blue eyes, he mostly people watches, or strokes the satins and velvets of the dresses I try on, like they're a great big cat he'd like to snuggle up to. I spend my time while he's away playing spades with our maid, Sadie, when she has the time. and reading women's magazines. I don't read books like I used to. I just can't seem to focus on them anymore. My mind drifts to some nameless place where the land is bare and arid, and there's no discernible objects for my thoughts to cling to. The magazines, though, are easily digestible. It's not so much the articles I enjoy, but the completing of a task. It's very satisfying, shutting it closed, knowing I'll never look at it again, because I've absorbed every single word. I've mastered it. I was reading a magazine the first time it happened. It was Rory's 7th birthday, and we weren't having a party, just cake and ice cream with my in-laws. As I stared at the cake across from me on the counter, I thought about the questions he always asked me on his birthday. How did you and Daddy meet? What were you doing when I jumped out your tummy? He always asked me, despite his father habitually being the one to answer. Such a violent childbirth. I tried not to think about it. My body was mine again. He was out here now, and everything had turned out just fine. Just fine. At school, he was learning about dinosaurs. I knew this because lately, every time someone did something he didn't like, he'd taken to calling them a velociraptor. His father had already fallen into that category a few times that week. He'd been short with all of us, really, which of course was to be expected. Despite the meticulous budget I'd created weeks prior, he'd overspent his paycheck again, and I'd had to make soup and spaghetti for dinner every night that week. I tried not to nag him much, learning from my own mother's mistakes. A marriage was something I'd always felt prepared for. I knew the right things to say and when to say them. You could say I was an expert on the subject. My husband and I never fought. No, it was the other thing I'd never really recovered from, which I guess isn't too uncommon. Your body changes and your mind along with it, and suddenly you belong to someone else in a way you never have before. And in this becoming, you lose something. You lose, and you don't know if another transformation awaits you, or if your only role is the one your body made for you. If what you were before was just filler nonsense, as if it meant nothing at all. I found myself longing for sympathetic weather. Days I'm not just expected, but encouraged to shut myself inside and cower in the wake of thunderclaps and pelting rain. The heaving sky an invitation for drowning. But no, those bright, chipper days would not allow relief. Days which never fully closed but dragged on, and me along with them, the glare of my guilt peeking through the blinds like those bored housewives who stalked the pavement outside my window even then. That's when I picked up the women's magazine. The cover was both a reminder and escape. There sat a woman in a skin-tight swimsuit, sipping a flute of champagne, all alone on a beach. She had red hair to match her heart-shaped sunglasses and sweetheart lips. Now she was a woman. One who'd always known right away who she was. The kind of woman whose only problems involved making up her mind on what car she wanted to drive to the casino, with her fur-trimmed coat slung across the passenger, one she'd bought for herself with her own money. Perhaps she was some kind of spy. She stole secrets and bought houses with them, but not this one. Yes, she was the kind of woman who played with her food before devouring the whole plate. She ate her fill by candlelight, seduced by her muted reflection in the mirrored ceiling of her dining room table, as if she couldn't get enough of herself. She was laid back on her elbows, sunbasking like a snake on a desert rock. There was no towel behind her. She was ready to melt into the sand or get swept up by the waves at a moment's notice. I found myself on the floor then, toeing off my slippers, allowing my housecoat to slide off my shoulders and expose the skin there. I needed to feel her. I needed to know just for a moment what was possible. I did my best impression of her sultry smile, tilting my chin to the side in a way that felt inviting, wanting. I needed to see how long I could hold it. I wanted to exhaust myself, and yet with each breath I relaxed into the pose, invigorated. The muscles in my face jumped like mites beneath my skin. They were not used to being used for such a long time. I could see the quaking of my cheeks from the corners of my eyes as I began to ache with strain. Grin and bear it, I joked with myself, only there was no laughter behind it. With each breath penetrating my smile, I retreated inward, losing sense of my own face, not numb exactly, but growing a distance from my body, unattached as if I wore a mask. And then, when the pain was completely gone, I wondered, what other aches and strains in my body have I calmly accepted and lived unaware of? Yes, I had lost all awareness by then, and could no longer feel what expression I wore. Without the warmth behind it, my inner face took on a neutral tone I could not perceive reaching the muscles of my face. Yet as I touched them, just for a moment before stiffening back to my original arrangement, they were as I'd left them, grinning all the while. I wondered, is this what a dead actor feels? Only half conceiving what that could mean. For it truly was a mask now, and my face was not my own. No, I was no actor, as there was no belief in the expression I wore, simply muscles retracting out to pull back lips and show teeth. I stared as if from a void and felt nothing. As a plastic fern or a wooden bowl of fruit, I stared out into the vastness of my ceiling, emulating a still water beauty, emanating from nothing. From the depths of my mind field, I sensed that I breathed softly, comforted by the notion that I still went on behind this nuclear dull stare in the face of eternity. All of it, the car, the house, the lipstick in my purse, the grand piano I never played, its wooden sadness and leaden notes, felt so permanent and concrete. Like the ashes of Pompeii settling over my body, so carefully arranged, this was my life now. Sitting at home, folding laundry as I waited for something to happen. The thought felt like a betrayal to Rory and his father, and I felt frightened. A pit in my stomach opened, tempting me to fall down. I released the smile with a small cry and did not leave my bed until Sadie woke me and told me it was time to get Rory from school. From beneath the covers, I told myself that would be the last time. I even begun pinching myself on my left thigh when the impulse arose to try again. And then, of course, I did try again. It went like this. What time do we need to pick Rory up tomorrow? My voice came out muffled as I tugged my apron off my head because the string at the back was permanently knotted. Ma wants to take him to church with her, so maybe around 3? Oh, good. I smiled pleasantly at my husband and sat at the dinner table across from him. That should give us plenty of time to nurse a hangover. He yanked off the cork of the wine with a pop. You planning on getting lush tonight, missy? Well, aren't you? He squeezed my hip affectionately. I knew I married the right woman. Despite myself, his words made me go all soft inside. It'd been so long since well, maybe I was feeling better now. Maybe I ought to try. So how was work today? I asked. Old Malone still giving you trouble? Nah, he's starting to lay off me now that we got a new guy on the lot. He had the habit of chewing on one side of his mouth with slow, thoughtful bites, like he was making a point to enjoy himself. I tried taking nourishing bites of the meal I'd prepared, but truthfully, I preferred beefsteak to what I'd cooked. I'd made him venison, an easy dish to get wrong if you lack the experience, which I don't. I think I made it to reassure myself I was no slaughtered doe bleeding out quietly in the snow. There was so much to be happy for. I, the good wife, who could cook game and serve it with the right wine because I was educated and not at all dispossessed. Malone's sister came by today to drop off some brownies. Oh, I said. Was it somebody's birthday? Nah, I think she was just being thoughtful. Or maybe she just likes watching people enjoy her bacon. Maybe she's sweet on you and wanted a chance to say hi. Ha! I doubt it. I'm twice her age. Girls like an older man. Pass the salt? He slid it across the table with an amused smirk. She was awfully friendly to you at the Christmas party last year, I continued. Then again, so was their dog. The worst of it was, I wasn't jealous. I knew he didn't sleep with other women. The mere thought would have made him blush. And maybe that was the problem. It wasn't that I didn't want him to touch me. My desire very much remained. The yearning to be touched, but not there with that. I longed for the pad of fingers on my breasts, the soft tap on my clitoris that gave way to a circling rhythm, and low sighs into his neck or the pillow. It was what it led to that always stopped me. The white-hot poker pain. I couldn't stomach it since Rory, such a violent, insidious childbirth. For the first time in my life, I'd wanted to die. And my husband, he'd been so patient, so very gentle and understanding. But beneath every kiss, every graze of my knee, up and down again, I felt that quiet expectation. We should make a habit of this, he said over his second helping, adding more food to my plate, though I'd hardly touched mine. Ma wants to see more of Rory anyhow. Next time we can see a movie, I offered. But then I won't be able to look at you for 2 whole hours. I kissed him tenderly, tasting the wine we'd both been drinking, and tried not to cry. Had I been an escort, I could at least hate the men who dog me and get a pretty penny out of it. But my husband, my ever-loving husband, who takes such good care of me, who buys the clothes I wear and the food I cook, who pays for the maid, who takes some of the exhaustion and loneliness away. All he ever asked was for one thing in return, and I'd fulfilled that, hadn't I? It was my ears Rory listened with, my smile that grinned up at Daddy when he came home from school. So why couldn't I be finished? Why couldn't I be put away somewhere to wait out my remaining time? Did I tell you Don's thinking of moving out west? His father-in-law's got bad gout. Oh, how awful, I said over my wine. He's always been such a good friend to you. He has. It's bittersweet, really, 'cause, well, you know what that means for me, don't you? Not a promotion. Oh, honey, I think it's time to open that second bottle. And open it we did. Yes, I knew my wine. Dionysus beckoned me from the bottom of a cherry-lipped glass halfway full. I always caught such a fright the next day, which is why I seldom drank. But before the pain comes the pleasure. I was loose, heavy all over. My eyes were glazed, unfocused as my husband continued on about his day. As his stories progressed, he became more and more animated. The different angles of his face revealed themselves, exaggerations of his other selves in the jut of his chin forward and the arch of his brow. I caught glimpses of the sales manager mid-lesson, patiently instilling into the clerks the art of the deal, positively a light. I felt the admiration he inspired, the pride in doing a job well done. Then came the seducer, the theatrical side that could sell a car to a man in a way that allowed him to imagine a better self in that driver's seat. The man who got the girl or the house or whatever he'd dreamt for himself. Last was the thoughtful listener, around his mother as she mumbled over the same stories of her girlhood in Sicily, a place he'd never have the means to see. All those faces, all these other people contained inside one man. A bigger forehead here, squinting eyes there, fragments, strangers, none of them real, all of them? It was that warmth pressing from beneath I sought, the soul animating the baggy flesh and turning the watery eyes around the room like a spinning wheel. It was that I'd fallen in love with. I wanted desperately to close my eyes, hear only his voice so as not to be distracted from the truth of it. But even those notes were a lie, distorting my image of him with a made-up face to match the voice and the words they spoke. Mid-sentence, I declared I was ready for bed. Migraine, I told the table. I know if I looked in his eyes, I'd be stranded. I didn't know what I wanted to see there, and moreover, I didn't want to understand. He found me later in the garden that night, posing as a nymph I'd once seen carved into a fountain. He didn't speak or touch me. He just sat for a while in the dewy grass, watching me. I wonder what he saw. Thank you. That was The Mannequin Wife. For more tall tales from the world of Spectra, please like and subscribe. Bye!